In this house, anything that doesn't suit us will be forgotten, where nothing good ever happened, and we will still have to pretend to keep the family together. This line doesn't come from a horror manga. It comes from a story of a girl who's trying to live normally and failing to do so. There's a common belief about disturbing manga that they try to shock you, that they overdo violence to provoke a reaction, that once you understand why they're extreme, the discomfort fades. And most of the time, that's true. But this manga doesn't shock you. It explains itself and justifies itself at the same time. And it asks you to accept that some suffering is indeed necessary. In this video, I want to walk you through a story, one that treats trauma like healing and pain like kind of freedom. I have read hundreds of manga over the past 4 years, and out of all the disturbing ones, this particular one felt different. On the surface, the story begins with something familiar. A young woman, a lonely man who watches her, a fixation that quickly turns into kidnapping. But this manga doesn't frame this as chaos, it frames it as a routine. The abuse isn't explosive, but repetitive. Meals, silence, control, justification. The horror doesn't come from the unpredictability. It comes from how quickly this becomes normal. From the very beginning, the manga suggests something dangerous. If suffering lasts long enough, it stops feeling like suffering. There's dependence, there's pain, and here that's what love looks like. And once the story teaches you to accept this form of love, it starts explaining why both of them believe it. Eventually, the story reveals their past. Both were abused by their parents, both were violated, both grew up broken. On paper, they share the same fate, but this is where the manga starts shifting its tone. It treats their trauma as identical, as if surviving the same violence makes them equal. Yet, their response couldn't be more different. She followed control, distance, and a future, while he chose the path of stagnation, revenge, possession. The manga keeps pushing them together anyway, as if similarity in pain erases responsibility for how that pain is used. This is where the discomfort deepens, and the story keeps blurring that line, asking whether shared pain can justify shared destruction. Then one day, she successfully escapes. She builds a new life, marriage, stability, career. From the outside, it looks like healing, but the manga doesn't let happiness exist. Soon, a pregnancy scare reopens an old wound. The forced abortion her father made her go through. Relief doesn't follow, happiness turns into guilt. Because back then, she chose herself, her career, her future. And the longer this life continues, the more familiar it starts to feel. And this quietly mirrors her mother, a woman who survived by sacrificing her own blood and flesh. So the question becomes unavoidable. Is she really different from her mother? Here the manga makes its boldest suggestion that happiness built on forgetting isn't healing at all. It's just trauma rearranged, but hidden better. Then one day comes the reveal. The man she thought she left behind, reduced to something helpless, was never silent. For 3 years, Hero pretended not to understand, not to speak, not to think. But he was always listening, always watching, learning her new life from the shadows. For 3 years. And when he finally speaks again, it all rewinds. Not because the past returns, but because it never left at the first place. Because he remembers her pain without asking her to heal. Her husband wants the betterment of her, wants her to move forward, to grow, to forget. Hiro doesn't. He treats her trauma like a proof, like something sacred, like the only part of her that truly matters. And that's the trap. Because when healing feels lonely, stagnation can feel like being understood. The story doesn't end with justice, it ends with balance. A life where no one gets better. They just learn how to live with the damage. And that's the real horror. Not the violence, but a world where trauma isn't confronted, we accommodate it. This manga isn't terrible because it's violent. It's terrible because it shows how abuse never ends. It just changes its shape. How bonds break instead of healing. How victims become caretakers of their own cases. How happiness itself can feel like betrayal. And the most unsettling part is, it almost convinces you.